All right, part two, we got cut off there a little bit. You're looking at in this slide, though, of another Technopole. This is what's called Research Triangle in North Carolina. It's between Raleigh and Durham, North Carolina, and Chapel Hill. Those 3 points make the triangle. Chapel Hill, that's where UNC Chapel Hill is, right? University of North Carolina. Durham is home to Duke. Raleigh is home to NC State. You get the idea, right? These high tech clusters tend to be near where universities are producing highly talented individuals that are ready to go. And so you're going to oftentimes see high tech clusters put themselves in those locations. Now, being near raw materials or even a particular market is not so important for these firms, right? What matters to them is proximity to not only talented individuals, but also major networks of transportation and communication, right? Is the infrastructure there, right? Are the airports there, well connected? Are the highways well connected? You get the idea. And also, local, regional, national governments a lot of times will pursue very aggressive policies to attract firms in this sector as well. They'll do this through tax breaks, for example, and other things to kind of reel businesses in because having a high-tech sector in your community is such an important symbol of the post-industrial world and post-industrial world success. Of course, there are drawbacks, right? Production facilities that manufacture computer chips or semiconductors or products like that oftentimes require toxic chemicals and large quantities of water. So this can be problematic. The other negative impact being that a lot of land needs to be cleared to make room for a lot of these high-tech facilities, right? So there is an environmental drawback that should also be considered. One of the more interesting and unique tertiary services that exists out there is the tourism sector. Tourism is actually now the world's largest service sector industry. The tourism boom actually began in the core in the late 20th century as incomes and leisure time increased. And in the past 30 years, the big boom in tourists has come out of really East and Southeast Asia in a lot of ways. That's reflected the economic boom that's taken place in those countries. Realistically speaking, many communities are very reliant on tourist receipts, and the industry has transformed downtowns, ports, parks, waterfronts. In fact, the monetary value of goods and services associated with tourism is estimated at more than $2 trillion. And with a growing middle class, especially in India and in China, this is only expected to grow, realistically speaking, all things remaining constant. This is the one tertiary industry that is also very big sometimes in less developed countries because although Europe and the Americas continue to be the main tourist destinations, visits to countries in Africa and Asia and the Pacific have grown to account for sometimes almost one-fourth of a country's revenue, making it a very central component of economic development, especially if that country's got something to sell, right? For example, people come into Kenya to see exotic wildlife, people going to Nepal or Vietnam for the unique scenery, or the Seychelles for the beaches, or Singapore for shopping, or China or India or Indonesia for culture and history. And tourism really requires only a very basic infrastructure. No heavy industrial plants, very little high-tech equipment. So the cost of creating one new job in tourism is about 1/50th of creating a job in the high-tech sector. And so this has been very appealing to less developed countries that, hey, this is a way that we can pursue economic development. Alternative tourism, as we oftentimes call it, also known as ecotourism, has been widely advanced as a more sustainable strategy for economic development in the periphery. Ecotourism really emphasizes self-determination of people to kind of chart their own course, authenticity, social harmony, preservation of the existing environment, small-scale development, greater use of local techniques and materials, and ecotourism is very, very important to the tourist sector, right? because everything that I just mentioned is going to actually bring money into local economies, right? Resorts in Jamaica generally don't pump money into the Jamaican economy. Right? That the money spent at those resorts generally gets cycled back in to the United States, where the businesses that own those resorts are located, right? But the ecotourism sector is definitely an exciting one. Bird watching in Costa Rica, visiting, Machu Picchu responsibly, right? Exploring the Amazon, touring potteries, the potteries district of northern England. All that's part of ecotourism and sustainable tourism. Costa Rica, Ecuador, Belize, these countries have been major players in this form of tourism. But it must also be remembered that this type of tourism is usually aimed at tourists who are both wealthy and environmentally conscious, and that's not a big enough market to really pin your entire country's development strategy on. To be quite honest, tourism benefits the core as well. The last time I checked, only 10% of Americans have passports. So American tourist dollars are generally, more often than not, going to be spent in pretty safe and predictable English-speaking national parks and resorts and theme parks and big American cities and historic districts. That's just kind of how tourism works in the United States. But this, of course, benefits American cities as well, right? So the United States makes a ton of money off of tourism dollars every year. Now, we do have to be realistic about the drawbacks here, right? This is kind of where things get real, because tourism can fall off in the face of economic downturns or natural hazards really, really, really fast. I know this is a worst case scenario, but the coronavirus shutdown, yeah, tourism's at a standstill pretty much globally right now. Yeah. As a result of this, and those areas that have not been affected yet likely will be for the foreseeable future. Not to mention that countless jobs in the travel planning industry have been lost to the internet, because you can do most of your planning online without the services of a travel agent anymore. Even in good times, right? Even in good times, even during periods of tourist boom, you have to keep in mind tourism jobs are seasonal. Yeah, most countries, most cities are not seeing tourists 365 days a year, right? Even the more popular destinations are still pretty seasonal. Tourism is also very trendy. Yeah. Once thriving tourist destinations can suddenly find themselves struggling for customers, right? If a country like Nepal or a country like New Zealand suddenly becomes quote unquote too obvious to go on vacation to, because like a country like Bolivia or Vietnam is like the next big thing, these trends can hurt countries that were formerly doing well off of tourism. Tourism is very vulnerable to political events, right? You guys weren't alive yet, yeah, but 9/11, definitely hit the tourism industry hard when people got shaky about traveling for a while. COVID-19 will probably have similar effects, although we'll have to wait and see. Not only vulnerability to disease, but vulnerability to natural disasters, right? Natural disasters, rather, and LDCs is going to hurt, tourism possibilities, right? One major earthquake ruining the infrastructure around the tourism sector, and it's going to be hard to pull in dollars. So, although tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry, you have to understand that there are drawbacks. And in addition to everything that I just said, you have to understand that the financial returns for tourist areas aren't really so high. I would say that for any country that's taking in a lot of tourists, they're maybe seeing about 40% of the dollars that are actually being spent after the organizing company and the airline has earned its money. And if you're staying in a foreign-owned hotel, that number really is going to be even lower, right? So if you're looking at areas where not only are people booking with tour organizers and airlines from their home country, but if they're staying in hotels that are foreign owned in other countries, like you go to Jamaica and you stay in an American owned hotel, man, if that's popular in those areas, then financial returns can sometimes be below 25% for those countries. And so it's important to keep in mind. Also important to keep in mind that tourism can involve exploitive relations. that sometimes debase traditional lifestyles and regional cultural heritages as they become sort of packaged for outsider consumption. Basically, the tourist trap, right? Or places that are really only being visited to be watched and photographed and posted on Instagram. Yeah. So these are some of the drawbacks. On the positive side, tourism can also help sustain indigenous lifestyles, regional cultures, arts, crafts. It can provide incentives for wildlife preservation, for environmental protection, for the conservation of historic buildings and sites, and of course, pump money into the local economy, right? So, there's a lot to be said for this sector as well. But hopefully, as you can tell from this lesson today, which runs a little bit longer than most of our lessons have this week, the secondary, or excuse me, the tertiary sector, quaternary sector, quinary sectors are pretty complex, right? Location does mean something. And this as well, right? And keep that in mind, and also know that being service driven can give a country a lot of economic power, but doesn't come without its risks, right? And you see that with tourism, for example. All right, so that's all for today, ladies and gentlemen. Do want to remind everybody of a couple of quick things that were passed on to me today to share with you guys. And this is from the nurse's office at Pope, but really kind of forwarded to me from the nurse's office at Pope from Cobb County School District. Actually really forwarded to the Cobb County School District from the Cobb and Douglas public health system. The director of the epidemiology of the Cobb and Douglas Public Health office sent the information below that I'm about to read you now. And it basically is for us to remind you guys that while schools are closed, that you need to be practicing social distancing, right? And that includes, hanging out at friends' houses or, at your cousins or whatever. This is not really the time to do that, especially with the amount of cases that we have in this area currently. You should also be self-monitoring for symptoms. I'm going to share a couple of links with you from the CDC that gives some very, very important reminders about how not only to take care of your own health during this crisis, but also, the health of others, of your neighbors, of your families. This is a serious moment in time. And so, here we are, right? And so we need to make sure that we're, following the guidance that we're getting from local authorities, from, national government authorities as well, from the CDC, because it's all really for our protection, right? Social distancing, social distancing, social distancing. Make it a way of life for now, because it will definitely save you and family and friends and perhaps people that you don't even know a lot of trouble and heartache potentially. Yeah. So we're practicing it at home here. Occasionally we have to go out to the store. And we try to, make sure that we're maintaining a safe distance from other people while we're there, and that we're washing our hands very well and sanitizing upon leaving. Yeah. So important to do, guys. I look forward to hopefully seeing everybody again in person soon, but so much of that is going to be dependent on our own behavior personally, locally, regionally, and nationwide. Okay, well, that's all for now. If anything, this is a great time to take up some hobbies. I am actually going to be returning back to, spending some time building Legos. These are great activities for me and my son. I just got the Batmobile in today, so I'll be working on that. A little bit later, I got a big model of Paris coming in that I'm going to be doing. I can't travel to Paris right now, right? So, by George, I'm gonna build Paris in my house, and that's what we're gonna do, right? So keep yourself active, keep your minds active, get to know your families a little bit better. I know that sounds, like kind of an obvious thing, but wow, what a great opportunity we have to really get to know each other so much better than we already do. Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to be it for this evening, guys, or this morning, or whenever it is that you're listening. And I do wish you a great day.